the Syrian army makes further gains in its battle against
استمرار القتل في سوريا والعالم يتفرج.
Capital Syrian town of Anzra and allegedly massacred dozens of civilians.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories we've been tracking this week. Syria, what we know as opposed to what we wish for. Does Wikipedia have a Western anti-Russian bias? The Kremlin seems to think so. The Tunisian media fought for their freedom, and now that they've got it, they're obsessed with the terrorism story. And a camera goes underwater at the International Space Station. In a conflict as bloody and as relentless as Syria's, in which at least 200,000 people have been killed and more than 9 million have been driven from their homes, amidst the images of violence and destruction, news consumers look for stories of redemption. So, when a video appeared on the internet last week apparently showing a Syrian boy rescuing a little girl while under gunfire, millions of YouTube viewers were captivated. The clip was even featured in mainstream news reports. However, the video, it transpired, was a hoax. It was made by a group of Norwegian filmmakers in Malta. A torrent of criticism followed from journalists, among others, who condemned the filmmakers for belittling the work of professionals trying to report the truth on the ground and the real suffering of the victims. This is the latest chapter in the story of the challenges faced by news organizations covering a war that most of them cannot or will not go to in a country that's ranked the deadliest in the world for journalists. And then there's the hostage angle and ISIL's own increasingly bizarre propaganda campaign in which journalists taken hostage have been co-opted to report for their captors. This is the story of journalists and truth under duress. Our starting point this week is not, as it turns out, Syria last week, but Malta sometime earlier this year. It was one of those stories that seemed too good to be true, and that's exactly what it was. A video designed to go viral, one whose director says, when first posted a few weeks ago, failed to gain traction. The director then decided he wasn't marketing it properly. So on November 10th, he deleted the original video and reposted it, adding one word to the title, Hero. It was immediately picked up by the Sham Network, an online channel specializing in news from the Middle East. And from there, it spread like digital wildfire and into the mainstream news media, all because of the addition of just one word to the title.
I think we should think about that word, a hero. This is pretty much like the narrative that people want to see about Syria. People are dying on the ground. And of course, there are thousands of Syrians who are brave and save and rescue people. But this is not the point. We are waiting for a political solution, not for a hero to come.
The Syrian Hero Boy video is problematic because it touched the heartstrings of viewers, because it's a story of children in a conflict zone doing almost superhuman heroic acts. However, it made a mockery out of all the authentic footage of real heroism that is taking place in Syria every day. And it also damages the credibility of other footage covering what is actually happening on the ground in Syria.
One of the biggest consequences of the Syria war is the high casualty in the journalist community, and that have pushed a lot of journalists to stay away from covering the Syria stories, which give a lot of space for amateur citizen journalists to do the work, to document and to tell the story. And that has in many ways encouraged a big propaganda war between the opposition and the government.
When the video came out, we, like everyone else, saw it at Channel 4 News, and we looked into it. There was something about it that didn't seem to ring true. The boy appeared to be shot, fell down, and there was a sort of puff of white smoke, and then he stood up and ran towards the car to fetch the girl. Now, obviously, if you've been shot in the back, you wouldn't be able to leap up and run. There was also no blood on the back, on his back, and also the puff of white smoke seemed very dramatic, and the way he fell was very dramatic. So that was the first thing that kind of rang alarm bells for us in the newsroom. So after that, we decided not to run it. You can never be 100% certain, but there's certain clues you can get from looking at stuff that's been uploaded from Syria. You can look at who uploaded it, which Syrian news network. There's logos that are put on the video. You can work out which ones have been consistently reliable.
When Amnesty looks at video content to assess its validity, we essentially stress test it. So we do several things. We'll look at the metadata. We'll look at the information that's sort of associated with the file itself. We'll essentially do background research on that social media account. Was it just set up? That's often a red flag, that it's an effort to get out a single piece of information. And of course we look at the content. I think the moral of the story, of course, is that we all need to be quite diligent, especially when there are potentially long-term credibility costs for organizations or institutions that help propagate narratives that are false.
Among the news organizations to fall for the hoax, The Washington Post, whose Beirut bureau chief retweeted the video along with a wide-eyed wow. Britain's Daily Mail, which calls itself the most visited newspaper website in the world, ran with the story, as did The Telegraph in the UK, which added that experts tell the paper they have no reason to doubt its authenticity. Rupert Murdoch's New York Post, Channel 1 in Morocco, Egypt's On TV, the IB Times of India. A long list of news outlets that should have known better. It was the BBC that finally revealed the truth 4 days after the video was reposted, that it was shot in Malta on the same set used for the film Gladiator 15 years ago. There has been precious little reporting from Syria itself. One organization did have a drone over the city of Kobane, and its own man on the ground reporting. That organization is ISIL, and the journalist is one of the militant group's hostages, John Cantley, who was taken 2 years ago.
The Western media, and I can't see any of their journalists here,
ISIL uses the reporters it kidnaps as propaganda tools. The group has already beheaded 2 foreign journalists in front of the cameras. Now it is forcing a third to tell its story, to further its cause.
In one of the videos, Cantley is shown in Kobani talking about developments on the ground and making them look like the town was about to fall into the hands of ISIS. And he criticizes the Western media and the media's coverage of the events in Kobani.
Contrary to what the Western media would have you believe, it is not an all-out battle here now.
However, the Islamic State does not even allow Western journalists to operate in areas under its control. So this makes, of course, the whole narrative that Cantley is made to present by ISIS in this video rather hypocritical.
John Cantley's a hostage, and this was clearly done under duress. So we chose not to air these videos because they're a form of torture. It's like you're watching someone being tortured, and the fact is this is obviously the latest twist in, you know, quite a sophisticated media operation that they have, including recruitment videos, hostage videos, beheading videos. So, you know, it's part of a bigger scheme.
ISIL's media scheme has had an effect. John Cantley is on a total of 5 videos. Initially, he's at a desk, and the YouTube viewing figures are low, a few thousand clicks. In the latest, when he plays the TV reporter, the numbers are much higher, almost 80,000. But the fake Syrian hero video, the one shot in Malta, proved almost 100 times as popular. 8 million views. If there's a lesson to be drawn by propagandists, it would be this. Don't just exploit. Don't just mislead. Start from scratch and fabricate. Mix in some redemption, some false hope, and your video will hit the big time. It may not be true. It's just what people want to see. On the download this week, our viewers weigh in on the coverage of the battle for Syria.
Obviously, children falling victim to that conflict, as well as false news, are issues that need to be discussed and tackled. At the same time, I believe that if that was the purpose here, then the video was deeply misguided. Rather than help any Syrian children, I believe that it mainly lends ammunition to those who would try to discredit real evidence of atrocities in Syria. While it's encouraging that there has been an apology, I believe that much of the harm has already been done.
trying to start a debate about children in conflict, those involved have actually given the Assad regime a great gift to continue the sniper and barrel bomb attacks at will. The reality is that trust and credibility are very hard to earn and very easy to lose.
We're always open to viewer feedback and ideas. If you've got an opinion on the news media, just go to our Facebook or Twitter page. Our Twitter handle is @AJListeningPost. Then fire up your camera, make a worthwhile point, hit send, and we'll see you on the download. Other media stories that are on our radar this week. The Russian government, not content with its soft power media push in television and in print, is getting into the encyclopedia business. On November 14th, the Russian Presidential Library announced it will create an online resource to rival the US-based Wikipedia, the open-source encyclopedia that anybody can edit. The library announced that analysis of Wikipedia showed that it is not capable of providing information about the region and life of the country in a detailed or sufficient way, while the new resource will objectively and accurately show the country and its population and the diversity of the state and national structure of Russia. Earlier this year, President Vladimir Putin called the internet a CIA special project. He said that Russia needs to fight for its interests online. Apparently, the Kremlin's already been doing that, according to a Norwegian programmer named Jari Bakken, who tracks edits made to Wikipedia pages by states or corporations. Russian government agencies have made more than 6,900 anonymous edits to Wikipedia on pages relating to Russia or Russian interests. Thailand is now 6 months into life under its latest military junta, and the news media there are still under the gun. A TV host has been forced off the air for interviewing Thais who dared to criticize the government. Nataya Wawirakap fronts a broadcast called Voices of the People That Changed Thailand on the state-owned public broadcasting service known as Thai PBS. She disappeared from television screens on November 14th, just after members of the junta reportedly paid a visit to the channel's managers and threatened to suspend the program if she was not removed. The authorities also ordered the station to change the program's format. Among the martial law measures passed under this government are Orders 91 and 103. They bar Thai journalists from interviewing or publishing the perspectives of government critics, including politicians aligned with the previous ousted government led by Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra. According to the New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists, Thailand's military government claims to be on a democratic reform track, but its sustained ban on critical reporting signals a commitment to military rule. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha should roll back martial law, restore democracy, and stop harassing reporters who are merely doing their jobs as custodians of the public interest. One of the dirty little secrets of the news game, its reliance on unpaid or lowly paid interns, has been exposed in a New York City courtroom to the tune of $5.8 million. That's how much the publishing giant Condé Nast has agreed to pay more than 7,000 former interns who launched a class action suit against the company, accusing it of denying them minimum wage. The former interns worked at magazines like Vogue, Vanity Fair, Wired, and GQ over the past 7 years. They will receive individual payouts that range from $700 to $1,900. The case was initiated by lead plaintiffs Matthew Lieb and Lauren Bollinger, who worked at the New Yorker and W magazine. They were part of an internship program that's considered a plum landing spot for young Americans looking to work in the media. Once the settlement was reached, Condé Nast CEO Chuck Townsend wrote in an internal email that settling the lawsuit is the right business decision for Condé Nast, as it allows us to focus our time and resources on developing meaningful new opportunities to support future up-and-coming talent. Earlier this month, we reported on how media freedom in Tunisia has given birth to a host of new news outlets, but has polarized political debate there. This week, we're going to look at another consequence of the unshackling of the Tunisian news media, the coverage of the national security story, and how disproportionate it has become. Under the regime of President Ben Ali, journalists were told how, what, and when to report on national security issues, if at all. But buy a newspaper today or switch on the television, and you will find that national security stories headlined terrorism frequently top the news agenda. The question is, does the story merit the amount of coverage it's getting? And are Tunisians really in the kind of danger that their media suggest, or are news outlets just chasing eyeballs, trying to sell papers, drive up ratings? Is the story overhyped? The Listening Post's Nick MUIRHEAD now from Tunis on the flip side of media freedom in the birthplace of the Arab Spring.
Mount Chambi, July 29, 2013. A military patrol is ambushed. 8 soldiers are killed. That night, the story airs on the public broadcaster. Graphic footage is broadcast into homes across the country. A legitimate news story, but the way that it was covered shocked many Tunisians.
When the channel showed the horrific images of dead and grieving soldiers, it was not professional, and we had discussions within the Journalists' Union about how to avoid supporting the terrorists' agenda by broadcasting graphic material.
I don't think that pictures of this kind could ever not create a climate of fear. There has been some improvement in the coverage of similar stories now, but unmonitored reporting in order to deliver news fast has inadvertently led to the broadcast of unacceptable images that show no respect toward people's dignity.
There is an issue when there is terrorism, war, death of man. When there are significant events like these, there is a race to win ratings, to win the scoop. Everyone needs to show professionalism when handling this topic, from security agents on one part to journalists on the other. But the threat is there.
Le danger est là. However, even when there isn't breaking news to report, terrorism coverage finds its way onto the news agenda, from tenuous allegations made on the airwaves. To debate shows where guests frequently hype the threat level. To so-called entertainment shows where unwitting participants are subjected to prank kidnappings. A departure from the coverage that Tunisians were used to under former President Zine Abidine Ben Ali. Less than 4 years ago, terrorism was an editorial red line for Tunisia's media. And on the very rare occasions that journalists did report those stories, they either echoed the state line or risked being thrown in jail. Today, those restrictions have largely fallen away, but the pendulum has swung to the other extreme. And the media and their fixation on terrorism are being blamed for creating a climate of fear, which doesn't only emanate from the airwaves. Flip through Tunisian newspapers and you will find similar stories.
Here, for example, we can see a number of excesses. The headline says that they are terrorists who are arrested by the Ministry of the Interior. They are already referred to as terrorists with their faces shown when there still hasn't been a court ruling against them. It's merely the ministry's claims. Here we can see very shocking and disturbing pictures of the bodies of terrorism suspects during a confrontation with the police. And of course the headline mentions a terrorist plot, using rather militaristic language. Security agents demolish terrorists. And here we can see a sensational front page with anti-terrorist brigades in their camouflage outfits, and the headline says, "Are we ready to pay the price of victory?" which sounds more like a propaganda headline than a journalistic one. We can't forget that reporting about terrorism involves talking about internal groups like Ansar al-Sharia, the followers of Sharia law, which were active at the beginning of the new government's rule, propagating its ideology. It was this group that started a death list of journalists. Members of Ansar al-Sharia used to come and write on the walls of media houses that journalists who oppose Sharia will die. This created a psychological conflict between journalism and terrorism, and we could sense an absence of objectivity.
I don't think we are giving it too much importance, or more than we should. We need to talk about it. It's better to be scared and prepared to fight against terrorism than sit here and wait. What Tunisian channels are doing would be done anywhere in the world.
That argument is debatable, but what is clear is that terrorism is being covered by more news outlets in Tunisia than ever before. There are now 17 television channels broadcasting in the country, opposed to 5 under the old regime. There is also an array of new print and online outlets. Tunisia's media are now in a fiercely competitive market, and terrorism coverage sells. But that may not be the entire story. Before stepping down in January this year, Tunisia was governed by a coalition called Troika, led by the Ennahda party. Ennahda, which calls itself a moderate Islamic group, was banned under Ben Ali. During those years, it was accused of a number of violent attacks against the state, a history that opposition channels frequently use against it.
There is an ideology behind some media outlets. It consists of systematically linking, without much evidence, the Islamists in power and terrorist acts. When Ennahda was clandestine, it did resort to violent acts that we could qualify as terrorism. But we were in a context of oppression, of dictatorship. Ennahda hasn't offered many mea culpas on this phase of its history, and as a consequence today, many link the terrorist phenomenon to the arrival of the Islamists to power.
Coverage that has reproduced political polarizations and debates on this issue has generated a misunderstanding among citizens about what is happening in the country. This kind of confusion naturally results in fear and doubts on whether there really is terrorism. Is it really true, or is it just part of an agenda? This topic is very complex. It cannot be covered with ease. But I can say that yes, the media coverage has generated a lot of fear. I can feel it in my own family.
Before anyone had heard of the term Arab Spring, Tunisians were calling their revolution the death of fear. That has proved premature. Fear is back, but in a different guise. And the institution that the revolutionaries fought to free, the media, they are the ones selling it.
More voices on the download now on the state of the news media in Tunisia.
Virtually the only public information that we have about alleged terrorists comes directly from these very security forces. They don't allow journalists to go into areas where these alleged terrorists allegedly operate. They say they coordinate with the courts and the Prime Ministry, but we don't really have evidence for this. Instead, we see press announcements from the security forces recycled through major media outlets, announcing quite emotionally the fight between security forces and terrorists. Not suspects, not alleged terrorists, but terrorists. Now, if terrorism is a crime, then it requires a due legal process, but it's difficult to see how this issue is being treated in the Tunisian media as anything other than a rallying cry in support of the security forces and their favored politicians.
Finally, here's how the American Space Agency, NASA, described what a few astronauts got up to recently on the International Space Station. It said that they explored the phenomenon of water surface tension in microgravity. That means they filmed some of the next sequences underwater in space. Two Americans, Steve Swanson and Reed Wiseman, teamed up with a European astronaut, Alexander Gerst, and they submerged a sealed GoPro camera into a floating bubble of water, and then they filmed the entire thing from the inside and the outside. Scientifically speaking, we're not sure what they proved, apart from the fact that even in space, boys will be boys. Back here on Earth, the video has more than 2 million hits on YouTube. We'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.
Yeah, that's so wild. Oh, it made it out the other side. A little too hard.
That is wild.
There, I think it's going to stay in now. Yeah, but you got to get it from going back down. Okay. What else can we get inside there? Pull out quick. Oh, dude. This is gonna get worse and worse.
Dude, film it.
Dude, this is amazing. Look at that. Whoa! Holy smokes! Oh my gosh! That is absolutely fascinating.